Oh hey, welcome back. If you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know that I love offset guitars and I love a bargain. Well, this Guyker offset vibrato is promising a boutique aftermarket upgrade for just $70, and it has the AVRI, the Mastery, and the Descendant in its sights. Is it too good to be true, or does it live up to their promises? Before we get into it, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about offset guitars and aftermarket hardware options for your Jazzmasters, Jaguars, Mustangs, and so on. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments what your favorite offset vibrato is and whether you would consider buying this Guyker unit. Once I've finished putting this vibrato through its paces, I'm going to have a really detailed, in-depth review of this unit, so please do turn on the bell notifications to make sure that you don't miss that. Alright then, on with the video. Probably kind of like you, I dismissed this vibrato when I first saw it, and I concluded that it was just another MIJ vibrato, like the WD Music, All Parts, Axes R Us, or Hosco units, or any of the other unbranded or rebranded vibratos in this price bracket, which are just the Fender MIJ vibrato, but with different branding on. I even started commenting on people's posts telling them that it was just another MIJ vibrato. And I'd reached this conclusion because it had a locking washer under the collet and because it had a flat or square top to the locking button. However, it kept popping up, so I decided to give it another look. And that's when I noticed that it was missing two important markers of the MIJ vibrato. Those are the 50mm string spacing and that the underside of the locking button should be a brass color if it is an MIJ derivative or a rebranded MIJ vibrato. And neither of those last two were the case. So I decided to give it a closer look. And that's when I noticed the specs. Firstly, that the Guyker offset vibrato is constructed using 304 stainless steel, and this is exactly the same as the material used on the Mastery vibrato. Secondly, I noticed that it had a proper sized and a proper angled fulcrum plate, just like the original vintage 1960s vibratos, the AVRI, and even the boutique offset vibratos like the Trent, the Mastery, and the Descendant. And this is a massive improvement over the import models. Lastly, I noticed from the spec sheet that it has 55mm string spacing, so this definitely isn't an MIJ derivative. Guyker have really kindly sent me one of these vibratos to review, and when it arrived I noticed a few other really interesting and important features. Firstly, it has a unique arm and collet design with an adjustable fit. In its stock configuration, the arm fits in the collet perfectly with no wiggling, rattling, or play of any kind whatsoever, and this is super impressive. I'd be happy to leave it exactly as it is out the box, but I'm glad it can be adjusted as well. Secondly, I noticed that it weighs exactly the same as the AVRI. It's heavier than the Squire unit, which comes in at about 280 or 290 grams, and it's a lot heavier than the MIJ vibrato, which comes in at about 250 or 260 grams. It's a touch heavier than the Classic Player, which is about 305 grams, and it is basically exactly the same as the AVRI, which weighs 335 grams. This means we have a nice high mass vibrato that we're working with. Thirdly, while some people had voiced skepticism online that the vibrato really is made using 304 stainless steel, having got it and compared it to the Offset Bridge by Offset Guitars UK, which is made of 304 stainless steel, I have no reason to doubt that it's made of 304 stainless steel whatsoever. The materials look and feel more or less identical. This definitely isn't just a cheap chrome-plated steel vibrato like the Fender Classic Player unit. This feels really premium and nice. And the last thing I noticed that I thought was really impressive and nice is that it's just really great to have a vibrato that clearly is taking inspiration from the Descendant, Trent, and Mastery vibratos, but which includes the traditional vintage style locking button. I really like that. Before we go on to analyzing the aesthetic, the feel, and the pricing of this unit, I want to take a second to compare the Guyker unit against Fender and boutique vibratos. Specifically the original patent design from Leo Fender, the AVRI, the Classic Player, the MIJ, as well as the Mastery and Descendant vibratos. Let's take a second to examine the fulcrum plate. If you take a look at the fulcrum plate on the original patent drawings for the Jazzmaster vibrato, you'll notice that the plate is very fat and it has a notable acute angle bent into it. However, many import and more affordable vibratos, like the MIJ and the Classic Player, completely deviate from this, offering a really very quite thin fulcrum plate that only has a slight or partial bend or curve to its shape. This, along with the quality of the steel, is one of the main things that separates the AVRI, Mastery and other boutique vibratos from the cheaper import units. However, if we examine the Guyker vibrato, you'll notice it features the same thick fulcrum plate with a really acute angle bent into it, made from really high quality 304 stainless steel, just like the Mastery and similar to vintage patent pending Fender vibratos, the Trent Guitars vibrato, and even the Descendant vibrato as well. We're very much in boutique or vintage correct territory here. This is super impressive, and we should expect a really smooth and reliable performance out of this vibrato as a result. I cannot overstate how wild and exciting it is to have a fulcrum plate of this quality on a vibrato at this price point. It is insane. Okay, let's take a second to assess the aesthetic of this unit. In general, I think the aesthetic is pretty nice. It's got a nice brushed steel look to it, which, again, is in a pretty similar vein to the Mastery, Trent and Descendant vibratos. The etched logo might be a bit of a Marmite thing for some people. It's not beautiful, but it's fine, and I don't think it's distracting or detrimental to the overall appearance of the unit in any way. Also, on closer inspection, the lock button isn't quite like the square edges of the MIJ vibrato after all. It's probably somewhere in between the MIJ and the AVRI. I don't think it looks quite as nice as the AVRI button, which has really beautiful rounded curved edges to it, but I'm glad it has one nonetheless, and they've done what they can to make it different to the Fender offerings. The one thing I don't like about it is that the vibrato arm comes without a tip. This just looks weird to me. However, it uses a 5mm push-on tip, exactly the same as the stage trem arm, and this one that I bought only cost me £2.95 and it fits like a charm, so there's no real issues here. Overall, I think it is a good looking vibrato that doesn't shake the boat too much. I could take or leave the logo, but it just looks like a premium style offset vibrato. Okay, and let's take a second to talk about my initial impressions on the feel of the vibrato. Now, when we talk about the feel of a vibrato, a lot of the time we're talking about the fit of the arm in the collet and the feel of the spring, neither of which I can expand much on without installing the vibrato first. However, in the hand, the build quality overall does feel very premium. And if you told me that this vibrato cost 2 or 3 times as much as it does, I'd probably believe you. There's nothing to suggest that they've cheaped out on quality here at all. There are just 2 things I have small concerns about that I'm going to mention now, but I'll pick up in due course once I've done my full in-depth review. Firstly, the vibrato arm is just a touch shorter than what I might have expected. It's a little bit shorter than a stage trem arm, which in turn is a little bit shorter than a vintage 1960s vibrato arm. It would have been nice to have a slightly longer option, but we'll see how it feels when I actually use it once I've installed it on the guitar. Secondly, I noticed that the spring has quite a soft feel to it, and I can depress it with my hands basically completely fully. This is a little bit concerning. I'm not sure how this is going to feel once I've got it strung up, or whether it's going to have sufficient tension on it to counterbalance my heavy strings that I use. We'll just have to wait and see. But if we compare this with my Classic Player, which has a particularly tough spring on it, which I've had to take out and squash repeatedly with my foot to get it to break up a little bit because it was too stiff, you can see that there's a definite difference here between the stiffer, harder vintage style springs and the spring on this unit. So this is something to bear in mind, but once I've done my thorough testing, I'll let you know how it feels and how it performs in practice. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on in this first look video is a quick word on the value of this unit, particularly inside versus outside the USA. Now, first of all, I want to quickly run you through what different aftermarket offset vibratos cost here in the UK, and I think this is pretty indicative of other places like Europe, Australia, maybe even Canada, anywhere outside of the US. So to purchase a AVRI vibrato at retail price plus the arm and the tip, that costs in excess of $200 here in the UK. The MIJ vibrato assembly costs $110, We actually can't buy the classic player here in the UK, and I don't think it's available anywhere outside the USA. But secondhand, they probably go for $80 to $100 as well. The Mastery and Descendant vibratos both cost at least $300, and the Trent offset vibrato and the Halon vibratos cost in the region of $200 for us. The only offset vibrato that you can get here in the UK or in Europe or anywhere outside the US, which costs less than $100, would be an unbranded version of the MIJ vibrato. And you can get those for 45 or 50 quid, which might be somewhere between $60 to $80. So the fact that the Guyker vibrato is available for $70 or for 50 quid with this spec and this quality of build is absolutely insane. Now, I've had a quick look online, and it seems like in the US, you guys can get the whole AVRI offset vibrato assembly for $100, that you can get the MIJ vibrato for $70, the classic player vibrato for about $50, and that the Descendant and Mastery vibratos are about $200. So while the value proposition might not be quite so mind-bending there in the US as it is here in the UK and Europe, I think the fact that you can get a offset vibrato that is built and spec'd like a vintage unit or a premium boutique unit for the same cost as an MIJ vibrato for $70 is still a pretty amazing proposition. Now, of course, that is provided that you don't get hit with some sort of tariff or import duty when importing it. But I think Guyker are starting to stock some US stock so that you can order it domestically from a US distributor. So hopefully that won't be an issue. While the full retail price of this vibrato is $80, if you join the Guyker Facebook group, you get 10% off, which is how you can get this vibrato for $70. And for 50 quid here in the UK, that is absolutely insane value. That this is a quarter of the price of the international RRP of the AVRI and a sixth of the price of the Mastery and the same price as an unbranded MIJ vibrato. That is just mind-blowing. If it's any good, at least. Cool, so that's it for our first look at the Guyker vibrato. I'm now going to get on and install it on one of my guitars, and I'm going to start testing it in a lot of detail and really put it through its paces, and then present you guys with a full detailed review. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel and turn the notification bell on so that you don't miss that full in-depth review. If you have any particular questions for me or particular tests that you want me to run on this vibrato, please do share those with me in the comment section below. And if you're using one of these already, I would love to hear your experiences with one. Well, that's everything for now then. So until next time, take it easy, look after yourselves, and we'll see each other again soon.